The PS3 and Xbox 360 have storied histories filled with good times and bad. A lot of the games in their libraries are considered the best in video game history, some for the wrong reasons. So in this episode of the Big Retro Show, I'm going to be talking about some of them. These are games that drew a lot of controversy, so let's go! The Call of Duty games have been no stranger to controversy. Never has that been so explicit than in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. It's been referred to as the best overall Call of Duty game in the franchise, and that's for good reason. It's the first game in the series to really nail down the fast-paced multiplayer that everyone enjoys today, and had such a compelling single-player campaign mode that maybe it was a little too realistic. In fact, it's the realism in the game that got it into hot water. In the game, you play as various members of a special forces unit known as Task Force 141, and it's your job to stop a group of ultra-extremists led by this dude named Makarov. The game starts out in Afghanistan, and you must prove that you have what it takes to become a member of the Task Force 141. Throughout the first stage, you take out enemies from near and far, using equipment like your rifle, a grenade launcher, and even get to man the gun on one of the Army's transports. It's so cool, and the gameplay and feeling that you are in the middle of a war zone totally immerses you into the experience. With the first mission out of the way, you start to realize that this game is truly something special, and it's a feeling that carries itself throughout the next mission as you climb to new heights, using a bit of stealth and even get to ride a snowmobile as part of a daring escape. But then, the fun times of killing bad guys are quickly erased as you turn your guns on innocent people. The fourth mission in this game is called No Russian, and it has caused a firestorm of controversy in the game. I remember playing this mission and just feeling really gross. This is probably a part of the code that could have been left out of the game because it's just too heinous. For the uninitiated, you control an undercover agent who infiltrates Makarov's inner circle. Together with Makarov's terrorist bunch, you arm yourself to the teeth and go to a Moscow airport, and along with your fellow terrorists, open fire on a crowd of innocent people at the airport. The game warns players that the level will be disturbing and gives you the option to skip it, but I didn't do that because I've never been squeamish about games. You carry on throughout the stage shooting civilians and armed police alike. It's not until you reach the end of the stage that you are confronted by well-armed soldiers, and then you don't feel as evil doing this portion of the game. After the rampage, you feel like total crap. Anyhow, I still think it's an overall ugly part of the game, and playing it for this review didn't change my opinion about it. In fact, I even tried to take out the terrorists, but no dice. If you turn your guns on them and open fire, you fail the mission. It's really diabolical. Now, as a player and decent human being, you can choose not to shoot a single person throughout this portion of the game, and I can't quite understand why I didn't back then. Maybe I thought that as part of the storyline, if I didn't participate in the carnage, then my cover would be blown. Or maybe I was younger and really didn't care. Either way, this portion of the game got a lot of attention. The Salt Lake Tribune's Vince Horucci said the level was in poor taste, especially because during the time that the game released in 2009, there had been a mass shooting at Fort Hood in which 13 innocent people had lost their lives. The shooting at Fort Hood took place on November 5th, 2009, just 5 days prior to the game's release on November 10th, 2009. Still, there were others who came to Activision's defense and said that the game's rating of mature was appropriate, basically saying that this is not a kid's game. At any rate, Modern Warfare 2 was and still is a beloved game in the COD franchise, and went on to sell millions of copies and garnered overall positive reviews from critics. I personally love this game, and chilling level aside, it's an awesome game. If you played this level, did you feel like crap after? Did you shoot the hostages? Don't lie. The Resident Evil franchise is probably one of my most favorite in all of video game history, with RE2 on the PS1 being my favorite, followed by RE7, which is just creepy as all. But one game that I haven't heard too many YouTubers talk about is Resident Evil 5. And if you've played this game, then you probably know why it drew some controversy. On the heels of the success of Resident Evil 4, which took place in a remote part of Spain, Capcom took the action over to Kijuju, Africa, which is a fictional region of West Africa. Anyhow, this time you play as Chris Redfield, whom you will remember from RE1 along with Jill Valentine, and he is over in Kijuju to stop this dude named Ricardo Irving before he hawks a bioweapon on the black market and turns the entire region into another Raccoon City. You team up with this girl named Shiva, which is a big deal in the series and puts some players off to the game since the gameplay relied heavily on teamwork. It was also the first time ever that you could play co-op in an RE game, and me and my boys used to play this game all the time on split screen. It was a blast. Anyhow, the game follows a basic RE formula in that you explore the town, get attacked at every turn, and pick up items by finding them on the corpses of your enemies and in boxes and barrels. You find weapons and can upgrade them using the money that you find also on your enemies and in scattered locations. And it's really an awesome game that not a lot of people appreciate. I guess that's an understatement because there were tons of people who disliked it because it was a game about a white dude basically massacring tons of black dudes in a small African village. According to the critics, it fed into some ugly stereotypes that really pissed people off. According to one reviewer, Dan Whitehead of Eurogamer, it plays so blatantly into the old cliches of the dangerous dark continent and the primitive lust of its inhabitants that you'd swear the game was written in the 1920s. He went on to say that the game becomes more outrageous in the later levels, with the stereotypes and the light-skinned Shiva making it worse. IGN's Hillary Goldstein said the game was not deliberately racist, that she didn't find it offensive, but felt how others could find it so. And I gotta tell you, I'm in the Hillary camp here because I didn't find anything offensive about RE5, any more than I did when Leon Kennedy broke into the home of a law-abiding Spanish citizen who found them intruding in his home and picks up a weapon to protect himself, only to be shot to death by Leon. Of course, Leon then goes on a murderous rampage and kills all of the Spanish people in the village, just as Chris does in Kujuju. All kidding aside, I think that RE5 is a great game and one of the most overlooked in the RE universe, and you should probably know about the controversy before going into it. If you played this game, tell me in the comments and let me know what your thoughts are about this controversy. I had never before played Bully prior to playing it for this episode, but I kinda knew what to expect since I've been playing Grand Theft Auto games and other games made by Rockstar since the beginning of time. Needless to say, I wasn't surprised or shocked by Bully. Hell, it even brought us some memories of how diabolical school-aged kids can be toward one another. In Bully, you play as this 15-year-old named Jimmy, whose mother and stepfather send him off to the prestigious Bulworth Academy, where you are instantly challenged by the brutes of the school. You quickly learn that violence keeps order around the school and proceed to partake at every single turn. But it's not because you yourself are a bully. In fact, in most of the time with the game, I was putting bullies in their place, as only Jimmy knows how, with his fists. Anyhow, you travel throughout the school completing missions much as you did in GTA. Some of them have to do with escorting the nerdy kid to his locker, or getting some notes back for the nerdy girl who was just a victim of the bullying. When running from mission to mission, you are constantly challenged by randos who just don't like you for some reason. The combat in the game falls in line with other Rockstar games and is quite satisfying. The fisticuffs are supplemented by a wide array of kid-like weapons such as slingshots, firecrackers, and baseball bats. It's essentially a juvenile delinquent GTA. And therein lies the problem that a lot of people had with the game. Child and parent groups began hating on Bully even before it was released, just based on the name. They said the game promoted, well, bullying among the youth. Critics believed that schools would turn into war zones after kids played this game. One politician that every gamer should know, Jack Thompson, pushed to ban the game and even went so far as to call it a Columbine simulator. The other reason that people hated on this game was that it opened the door to relationships with the opposite sex, and in some cases the same sex, which angered the conservatives. Despite the efforts of the parent groups and Thompson, Bully turned out to be a massive hit for Rockstar based on its humor and storyline. I personally found the game to be super fun and enjoyed my time with it. People need to lighten up and actually play the game before making judgment on it based on its name. Sadly, this is a constant thing for video games, films, and music. People love to get offended really easily. Not me though. I say the more games the merrier. Have you played this game? The 7th generation of consoles was chock full of first-person shooters, and so it was really difficult as it is today to stand out from the rest. Call of Juarez, the cartel attempted to do this by crafting a storyline that follows 3 cops who take on the Juarez cartel. In Call of Juarez, the cartel, you play as this old-school cop and Vietnam veteran Detective Ben McCall of the LAPD, Agent Kim Evans of the FBI, or Agent Eddie Guerra of the DEA. You must play as one of the 3 throughout the entire playthrough, so there is no switching. The plot of this game surrounds the 3 heroes taking on the Mendoza cartel in a series of missions in which you sabotage the cartel by attacking their stash houses and stealing their drugs and guns. Most of the action takes place in Los Angeles, with the end stages taking place in Juarez, Mexico. This is a game where you wield multiple weapons, shoot a lot of bad guys, and partake in hidden agenda missions in which you steal items for your own hidden agenda, and to help out people you care about. Essentially, you get to be a dirty cop in this game. This isn't a game that offers anything new to the first-person shooter drama. In fact, its rather bland gameplay is propped up by the story and the interaction between the three heroes. They can be really annoying and constantly asking you if you practice shooting your weapons in the middle of gunfights, and taking every single moment during a gunfight to remind you that if they weren't there, you'd be toast. Aside from the character interaction, the levels consist of you killing and murdering members of the cartel indiscriminately and with malice. It's standard video game stuff. But when this game released in July of 2011, there was an entire cadre of people, mostly in Mexico and in border towns like El Paso, Texas, who denounced the game due to its glorification of the Juarez cartel. They argued that the game was akin to narco corridos, songs that glorify narco culture and trivialize real suffering that the people of Mexico and border towns in the US have undergone at the hands of real-life cartelians. Like many people who criticize video games, they were extremely uninformed. Because although the game is ultra-violent and has adult themes, you can't do anywhere near the type of things that the real-life cartel does to people. In Call of Juarez, a cartel, nowhere will you find heads in the middle of the streets, bodies being dissolved in acid, entire lineages killed within their homes, Sicario hitmen whose sole purpose is to murder, or similar heinous activity that's typically associated with the real-life cartels. There are similarities though, I won't lie. The tropes of drug tunnels, dirty cops, human trafficking, and drugs and guns are well represented in this game, but not done in an exploitative way, at least not to me. They are used as more of props that hold up the story between the three agents, who each have their own issues and have done enough dirt to put them behind bars. It's sort of sad on my part because I was hoping to get into some real life cartel activity, but this is bland. How crazy would it have been to see a bunch of heads in the streets, mass tombs filled with dead bodies, or vats of decomposing bodies? Now that would have been over the top, but I was sort of expecting it due to everyone denouncing this game. Sure, there is a lot of killing of black and mostly brown people in the game, but we are talking about a video game. Video games are violent, and duh, everyone knows this. At any rate, this game is a mediocre shooter that sort of gets a little repetitive. Still, the game lands on this list due to the controversy generated. Let me know what your thoughts are about this game. We wrap it up with Too Human. When looking into the controversial games for this episode, Too Human wasn't a game that I would have ever thought would have made it onto this episode. At face value, this isn't a game that is filled with any controversial subject matter like the games I mentioned previously. The reason that Too Human is controversial is a little more subtle. At its core, Too Human is an action game with RPG elements baked in that features a story laden with Old Norse mythology, melded with futuristic elements. It's a bit out there. You play as this dude named Baldur who's out to stop Loki's seemingly unstoppable mechanical army. Too Human's gameplay is rather enjoyable as you destroy your enemies with melee and ranged attacks. Your choice of class in the game and the skills you pump your experience points in determine which attack is most powerful. It's standard RPG stuff. The action in this game is plentiful and you will be fighting a wide variety of enemies, and it's mostly fun to fight them with your special attacks. The graphics in this game were decent for their time and are good to look at today as well. The game's biggest flaw, aside from the controversy it generated, is its camera. Instead of using the R stick to look around like most other games do, they utilize it for your melee attacks. Why they did this, I'll never know. So you are essentially at the mercy of the game's janky camera. To understand why this game is controversial, you have to know that the game's developers, Silicon Knights, first made a deal with Sony to bring the game to the PS1. When that fell through, the development began on the GameCube as the game's developers and Nintendo inked a deal to bring the game to that system. As history tells, that deal fell through as well, and Microsoft bought the rights to the game, which used a modified version of the Unreal Engine. And when I say modified, I mean that Silicon Knights essentially stole the engine from Epic Games, changed some code here and there, and used the stolen/modified code to create Too Human. Now, Silicon Knights sued Epic Games for breach of contract, saying that Epic Games failed to deliver the Unreal 3 engine program that they ended up appropriating anyways, and Epic Games countersued them for copyright infringement, breach of contract, and misappropriation of trade secrets. Heavy stuff here. Epic Games won and forced Silicon Knights to pull the game from store shelves and destroy all unsold copies. All the games that were planned and in development using the Unreal 3 engine code that they stole had to be scrapped. This included any development of the sequels to 2 Human, which was planned as a trilogy similar to the Star Wars movies and other games they were working on. The games were also removed from the Xbox Marketplace. Strangely enough, the game is currently available on the Xbox Store as a free title that I downloaded and is part of my library. If you have an Xbox, check it out, it's free. X-Men Destiny was also a casualty of war in this lawsuit, and it too was pulled from store shelves. And that's going to be it for The Big Retro Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to The Big Retro Show, and I will see you next time.